That was All-Star Game captain John Scott there. The audio courtesy of Pat the other day. I know you got a chance to speak to him. Hello, everybody. I'm Dave Turner, along with Pat Pickens. This is Puck Talk with Pickens and Turner. Pat, you got a chance to talk to John Scott the other day. This ongoing issue now with him and the captaincy in the All-Star Game. I'll give my thoughts on it in a second. But what did you get from talking to him the other day?
The interesting thing for me was, I'll start with this story because, he's in St. John's, Newfoundland. He played his first game for the Ice Caps on Wednesday night in Bridgeport, and they went to overtime, actually. And the AHL overtime format has changed from, it was 4-on-4 for 4 minutes, then 3-on-3 for 3 last year, and they went strict 3-on-3. And I asked John after the game, straight up, if he had any, if he was trying to angle his way on the ice to play in the overtime, and he said, no, absolutely not. He said, I'm not a skill guy, and he said that his team was trying to win the game, which, it was, I was trying not to, laugh at him because, John's, obviously trying to be serious here, but therein lies the irony, because he's not able to play 3-on-3 even in an AHL game, and yet you're going to get him 3-on-3 in an NHL All-Star game. So I mean, John, give John a lot of credit. He's being a good sport about it. He's taken this whole thing in stride. It's kind of funny to hear him, just slam the blogosphere a little bit. Not, I'm sure it's not fun for the people involved, but in that sphere. But he's a real solid guy, real honest guy, and as say what you want to about this thing as a joke, it's a farce, it's kind of silly, but good. Good for John, just for the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's handled it pretty well, considering that, look, the rules are the rules, and you shouldn't have to change them once something happens.
Mm-hmm.
And they tried to circumvent it, and they realized that the negative backlash wasn't good. Look, John Scott, he's been a journeyman, everything about that, but here's my issue with it. Again, nothing about John Scott. Not gonna, not talking about his character.
Yeah, it's almost like he's like just the, and he even said it. He's kind of the innocent bystander here.
Yeah, exactly, absolutely. But here's the thing: they're playing for money this year. They're playing for $1 million. The winning team gets $1 million. You mean to tell me that in 3-on-3, that's probably going to be sluggish to begin with?
Mm-hmm.
Because the guys are going to get tired and they're just going to stop skating. But we'll get, we'll deal with that once the All-Star game happens. You put him in there now, and I mean, the Pacific Division is going to be at a disadvantage. And I mean, they're playing for money. Sure, I mean, who cares? Do these guys really need a share of $1 million? Yada yada. But at the end of the day, there is a prize. They are trying to win this thing, whether they're going to play extremely hard or not. I'm sure it'll be, towards the latter.
Somewhere in between, probably.
Yeah, but I mean, here's the thing: is that they need to do something for the future, just like Zemgus Girgensons last year, to not let this happen. Again, not John Scott's fault. Maybe it was just a joke started by someone on a message board and it gained steam. Mm-hmm. But for me, I just think that it needs to be changed, because I think it takes away from the game.
Yeah, it sounds like it's going to be changed where they go away from you vote for anybody, and then now it's just going to be the probably back to the ballots, the online ballots, and I mean, let's face it, that's probably how it should have been all along. But it's an interesting story to me for sure, especially since he's like I said, he's in the American League on a team that's out of the playoffs, Montreal. It's out of a playoff spot at the moment. He got traded from Montreal to Arizona, and the interesting thing there is that he went from inside a playoff spot and now to an AHL franchise that's out of a playoff spot. But I got to spend some time with John. He's real solid guy, real down to earth, real tough sledding. Now his wife is pregnant with their kid, with twins. They're moving to Michigan, which is where they make their home. So I asked him straight up if he had any reflections about it. And he's got a degree. He said he's going to be an engineer. If hockey doesn't work out, he still can do that. So, I mean, it's a guy you root for in life, but you don't want to watch him necessarily in a 3-on-3 tournament.
No,
But
I mean, he certainly seems like he's done all the right things here, and maybe it was a little defiant, but why not? I mean, that's the whole point of voting, and you know what? He's trying to promote his brand. Athletes are a brand on their own, and you know what? He wants his name out there because you know what? Who knows if playing in that game and the notoriety somehow, some way could help him possibly get a contract over someone else.
I mean, it could be TV. It could be
exactly,
after hockey.
Exactly.
So moving on to his, you mentioned some of the, we talked about the Pacific Division. We've talked a lot about the Pacific Division for better or worse, and we'll move up to one of his former rivals who Arizona is actually fighting for a playoff spot. We'll go to Vancouver and discuss the Canucks, who, Dave, we keep waiting for them to fall out of this race here. And it's just not happening. And I guess this is going to be John Scott's all-star teammate, Daniel Sedin, which, say what you want to about that. But so Daniel Sedin set the Vancouver Canucks record for goals scored. He netted his 347th career goal as a Canuck. Every goal he scored in his career has come in Vancouver or as a member of the Canucks. Dave, it feels like there's a little bit of an East Coast bias here in terms of star power when you factor that, Daniel Sedin probably doesn't get the credit he deserves, mostly because he's attached at the hip with his brother, and his brother is usually setting up those plays. But Dave, the Canucks have a pretty storied history at this point. I guess they've been it's almost 50 years by now. Is this mark getting the appreciation maybe it deserves?
I'm not sure, and it's funny how I posed this question to you, so I'll pose it again here now: is where is the Sedin's place in NHL lore right now? And I think that where they play, certainly, I mean, even West Coast. I mean, to me, American West Coast is still even different than all the way up in Vancouver, especially because teams are not that close to them, other than some of the Canadian teams that are still pretty far geographically. It's funny where you look at these guys, and they were very close to winning a cup, and they didn't. They've won gold medals in the Olympics, but these are two players. Daniel and Henrik, kind of lumping them together because certainly they've pretty much done all of it together.
They have the same contract, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, I mean, and also try to tell them apart. Apparently, there's their own teammates that struggle telling them apart. But I think the question really becomes, and I don't know what the answer to this is necessarily, but I just wanted to speculate here: is where do these guys kind of fall in terms of the better players of this? Obviously they don't lap the same generation as some of the guys that have just retired, and also you're not going to lump them in with the Ovechkins and Crosbys and such, but they're going to be guys who maybe they retire in 3-4 years. So Elias will be retired at that point. Yager probably won't be retired at that point. But I think it's interesting that these guys have been, really consistent, great players that are, they're towards the end of their run now. But I think they deserve more credit for being really, really good for a lot of years now.
I think the remarkable thing is that they don't play a particularly. They're not really, a high-powered, fast-paced style, but they play that style that works. They play that cycling. We talked about in terms of the basketball analogy, the half-court set, if you will, and nobody really does it better than them. The problem, obviously, with them is that they haven't had a consistent line mate that has been able to play with them. And Alex Burrows did it the year they went to the Cup Finals, and that was the right fit at that time. And look at what happened. They made it to the Stanley Cup Finals. You almost it's weird, though. What's interesting to me is that he doesn't get a lot of – those guys don't get a lot of flack, though, from the public for Vancouver's failings, do they? I mean, it's more, the coach gets – Alain Vigneault got fired, and it's not really been – that this is what the Canucks have, this is what the Sedins haven't done. It's been their defense isn't good enough. It's been, they got shut down by a hockey. It's been that Roberto Luongo was not good enough all those years, and that they had to choose between him and Schneider, and that Schneider should have been. and that it was, Vania fell on the sword for it when they got swept in the, I guess in the 13 playoffs. So I mean, they don't bear a lot of flack for what happens, but I also agree they don't generate the same kind of credit that that other great superstar players do. And I don't know, they're kind of in, the Canucks are kind of in a strange spot though, because the Sedins are probably certainly two of the better players in the franchise's history. When you look at guys like Trevor Linden, who are revered up in Vancouver, Henrik and Daniel are going to be in that same stratosphere for that organization. But and certainly, they get that credit for their offensive ability in terms of the cycling game and the playmaking game. But I agree with you. It's tough to really state where they fall, just because they're not. They're Swedish for starters, which non-North American stars don't generate the same kind of media attention in the States, especially. But also that, like you said, they're in the Western Canada and especially Vancouver, where there's a market that's kind of tucked away there. Even Seattle is tucked away as a sports market, but Vancouver, especially, yes, really, in terms of proximity to other teams, it seems like you said, maybe they're not getting the same due they deserve.
Yeah, I mean, I think their style of play really comes into it because the league is such about it's such about speed, and they don't play that game. And also, I think that for young fans, I mean, we all try to emulate someone as a kid.
Yeah.
Because they're so synonymous and they're together all the time, I almost feel like it's hard because you're like, oh, I'm the Sedins, all right, well, which one are you? Are you the passer or are you the shooter?
Yeah.
Like that kind of thing where it's like, I almost feel like the fact that there's two of them makes it harder because it's like, oh yeah, well, there's two. Like, how many times do we ever really see that? I mean, even guys who have played together
right now, really, is it, right? Because Henrik's hurt,
Yeah.
Henrik's hurt, so I mean, right now we're kind of seeing Daniel on his own, but
I certainly. But throughout their career, it's certainly been them together. So I think it's just a different way that they're looked at, just because it's a unique situation. But speaking of a situation that is unique for this year, because there's been no snow in the northeast, at least not until we get way up there. I mean,
unless you're listening to this recording after the weekend.
Yes, if you're listening to it after Saturday, you're going to be like, "What the hell are you talking about?" But we got some snow coming to the Northeast. It looks like the DC area is going to get hit pretty hard, even 2 feet. The Big Apple might be spared with maybe between 6 inches and a foot. I'm no meteorologist, so I could be very wrong. I probably will be. But this is going to impact some games, isn't it?
Yeah. You look at, like you said, the DC area, I mean, they've already moved the game up from from Friday night to Friday at 5 o'clock, and the reports are coming out that the league is, or the Washington DC is.
Yeah, I lost you,
Dave.
I lost you,
East Coast. Sorry, Matt. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, did you have something open or whatever? You there?
Sorry, I got you. You're gonna cut this part out, right?
Yeah, I will find it. I'm not sure how many minutes we're in here, but I will find it.
Okay.
I can do it from here, and I can count down the other way. Hold on. Okay. Yeah. So, start with.
You want to start
again? Start with your point again. Where I say we're gonna miss some games here. Just start over from there.
Dave?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. All right. So all right. So we already got the start of this. Hang on. Let me get to a start here.
No problem. Hold on. Go for it. So
the problem here is that obviously the Washington's going to get snow. You said DC is going to get probably 2 feet of snow, and it's probably going to cripple the city, is what it sounds like. Now the question here is, the Ducks game in DC has been moved up to 5:00 on Friday, and DC officials reportedly are trying to get the game postponed. But the problem, obviously, with the Ducks, with the game featuring the Ducks, is the Ducks are supposed to play in Detroit Saturday night, and they only make one more Eastern trip the rest of the year. It's and it's Pittsburgh on a Monday, Philly on a Tuesday, and then Columbus on a Thursday. So that's it for the Ducks as far as the Eastern trip. Now, the Islanders, as an example, are in Ottawa on Friday night, and they're supposed to play a home game Saturday in Brooklyn against the Flyers on Saturday night. Questionable whether that game's going to take place or not. Just because weather impacts it. But my question here, Dave, and we kind of talked about this a little bit off air, is should there be more schedule built into? Should there be more dates built into the schedule for these types of situations? Because it feels like this happens about maybe once or twice a year, where we get a serious, crippling snowstorm, and a game gets postponed, because people can't get there. Players can't get there. I was just reading the story about the 334 Club in New Jersey. They had a 15-inch snowstorm in 1987, and only 334 fans were able to make it. It's a famous game now around in New York, Jersey. NHL.com did a story about it. But the thing with that is, how about the other 15,000 or some odd people who had tickets to that game and didn't get to go? So the question is, Dave, who actually wins when you have these games scheduled and then snow comes? I mean, you can't change the weather. You can't predict the weather in July when the schedule's put together. But at the same point, shouldn't there be days built into the schedule where there's a state of emergency in Washington and they're going to play a stupid hockey game?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, especially because you're talking about a cross-country kind of thing here where, it's not just the East, because the West teams have to come out East too, and they could be there right where the snowstorm, which is what is happening. I think it's a tough one. I know they're going to that bye situation next year, but I don't think it's a bad idea that if you're going to play teams from the West out East, you should have quite a few days in between games, just so that you can deal with that if it happens. I mean, sure, how hard is it if the Devils and the Islanders or the Rangers and the Islanders gets...
Yeah, or the Flyers and Islanders Saturday are supposed to play.
Yeah, I mean, if that gets snowed out, who cares? You could play that game any day both teams have off.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure they'll have a day off in between. I mean, you could even play it,
break the All-Star game in. Break the All-Star break a day short and play it then. You
can do that, exactly. But to me, that's where it gets difficult, is with these cross-country flights, because you're not just going to fly a team out there in the middle of like a road trip or something all the way out east just to play one game and then fly back out west again. So I do think that they should consider that. There is a good chance that, there could be a couple games canceled a year. We've seen it. And hell, it's not Buffalo. It's not Montreal. Yeah. It's going to be DC that's getting the snow. So it just proves that, I mean, hell, even Nashville could get
Carolina,
because they're not ready for the ice and stuff, where they almost have a tougher time than up north does, because up north the infrastructure's in place. So there's quite a few teams that fall within the area where they could have games canceled due to snow.
Yeah, and with I guess we'll use this as a segue. With the races being as tight as they are, every game becomes more and more essential. And Dave, if you look at the standings, these races are pretty incredible in terms of how tight they are. I don't like comparing. You can't compare division leaders from wild card spots, because that's just pretty absurd. But if you basically drop the bottom team in each division in the East, and that's basically all you can drop out of in terms of contention right now. Columbus, Toronto's in it mostly because they have games in hand. less so than, or more so than Buffalo, because like I said, they have games in hand. But Dave, if you look at the wild card race, you got Boston in the East with 53, the Devils in the East with 53, and a whole bunch of teams chasing those two. And then you go out west and you say, well, where we've been hard all year on the Pacific Division, but now you look at Colorado's in the 5 spot in the last wild card spot, and who's right there 2 points back of them but the Coyotes. Dave, this is going to be great in terms of drama, in terms of excitement, in terms of parity. But as the All-Star game is set to approach, this is gridlock here,
and it's fantastic. I mean, parity is what will make people watch. I know so many people who I run into that tell me they only watch hockey in the playoffs, and I'll tell you right now, the playoffs are going to start in mid-March. Just because you're going to have so many, you're going to have these 4-point games or maybe, 3-point games in the standings, just because, you're going to have teams that are facing each other. Look, if the Devils and Pittsburgh are right there against each, they play soon. They're going to play a couple games late in the year. Nashville and Colorado, I think, have one left. Arizona is going to be playing some of these teams. I know Arizona, I think, plays the Sharks 4 more times before the year ends. They just played them for the first time the other day. This is a great thing for the league because as much as we could sit there and we could debate who's going to win, who's going to win these last few spots, it's so close that it's, who really knows? I mean, did anyone think Colorado was going to rise from the ashes with all the kind of trouble they had going on the last year and a half, basically? Nashville kind of falling off the map has helped that, but yeah, and then you look at the other division where we keep saying Vancouver is going to fall out, but they haven't. So, to me, these races are going to be fascinating. And the one that I think, maybe you'll agree with me in this, I think the Montreal situation is really fascinating right now because this is a team that I think should not be as bad as they're playing right now, even without the goaltender.
Yeah.
But the question is, how much of a difference is he going to be able to make? I know we talked about this, and he's been out for a long time. Even if he comes in and is good, with the issues that this team has, is it enough to get them in the playoffs?
I read an interesting thing by Travis Yost, who's obviously one of the better analytics writers. He works for TSN, and the remarkable thing is that we all expected Bruce Boudreau to get fired at some point when Anaheim was headed south, and he didn't. And he's Yost's piece was that he evolved his system to be more defensively inclined and to limit shots and scoring opportunities. And that, the Ducks offense hasn't gotten remarkably or even drastically better, but their scoring chances against have dropped substantially. And therein lies the problem with Montreal. Montreal had the all-world goaltender, but without him, they have no answers. And Montreal, for whatever reason, now suddenly can't generate the same kind of scoring opportunities and has not been able to adjust without, or make the adjustments in season, as teams figure out how to defend them offensively and also, attack their defense. We agree, Dave, that their defense is hit and miss. PK Subban's not having a spectacular year. Andrei Markov is what he is at this point. Yemelin and Petrie's been in and out of the lineup. He's been hurt a little bit, but and underperforming offensively. But at the same point, this was last year too, Dave. And this is the reason why Carey Price was the Hart Trophy winner and the MVP of the league, because he carried that team to the top spot in the Atlantic Division. And now without him for and it might be another month, which would be basically half the season at this point he would miss. You're starting to see that. So you wonder. It sounds like Mike Therrien's safe up there, but you just wonder why.
It's funny. This kind of likens to what I always say, that firing a coach sometimes this is a convenient excuse that fans like to use. Yeah. Or I'll get rid of the coach because our beloved players can't be that bad. Well, maybe they are. I mean, maybe this is not a fix that a coach is going to come in and do something differently. Like Pittsburgh, I think that was an issue.
Yeah, for sure.
But Montreal, I don't. I look at this team and I say that, I mean, if they were doing this with Carey Price and net, absolutely, I would say there's something really wrong with this team. But as much as we now know Montreal to be a fatally flawed team without the goaltender, still, how many players? He's their best player. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
How many teams can go multiple months without their best player and be that good? I mean, you take Henrik Lundqvist off the Rangers. What are they? They're probably a 40 team right now.
You've seen it because he hasn't been very good lately. I mean, over the last couple of months here. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's basically the perfect example where, the goaltending – and that's almost, a flaw too, a substantial detriment because you expect it out of them at some point, You get to that point where you're just like, yeah, we expect Hank to be the best player. We expect Carey to be the best player on the ice at all times. And when they're human, you don't know how to – you get that shell shock, don't know how to respond to it. I would say, you could almost make the case, and I love him as a player, but, Max Pacioretty's production has fallen off a cliff here. It's basically since, the start of December. He has 12 points since December 1st.
You think the pressure's getting to him?
I don't know. Maybe. I mean, but, it's one of those things where they're juggling lines. That Gallagher's been in and out of the lineup. He was hurt. And yet, what's remarkable to me, Dave, is that this team is such a team that rises to the occasion in big spots. Where you look at, how they play the Rangers when the two have played head-to-head this year. And they've dominated a couple of games. Or how they played Boston in the Winter Classic, when the opportunity is there and when the spotlight's bright, it's almost as if everybody's on watching, everybody's there, but they almost are going through the motions otherwise. And it's weird to say that though because everybody's always watching Montreal,
Oh, no doubt. I mean, that's the thing is they're always under the microscope. They will always be under the microscope. They're the Canadians. That's kind of just what it's going to always be for them.
Yeah. So, I mean, Dave, gun to my head, I'd still say they're probably a playoff team.
Yeah, I think so, but I don't know if it's nearly a conclusion that we would have thought of because there's just so many other teams that look. I mean, they're already kind of behind a few teams points wise. Where I mean. Are they going to be better? Are they going to be better? I mean, Ottawa to me, I think they're flawed. But looking at Boston, looking at Tampa Bay now is probably even going to win the division. Yeah. Florida, I don't think is going to fall off, but you never know with them.
They're going to get it. I think
Detroit is going to make the playoffs because that's what the Detroit Red Wings do. Boston to me maybe is the weak link there, not by much though, because I like what Boston's done. After the first month of the season, I know they've been a bad home team. I know they've been a bad home team, and they haven't been great lately. But I still think if you look at Boston and Montreal, I mean, I think they're neck and neck. And then when you look at Pittsburgh, I don't really kind of throw Carolina or Philadelphia in there. The Devils have certainly hung around. I don't think it's going to be easy. I think that if they make it, it's going to be because the goaltender comes back. Price is, and he gets to the point where he's playing and stealing them games. I think that's what it'll take, to be quite honest.
And let's face it, if Montreal misses the playoffs, Therrien's going to get fired, right?
Of course. I mean, I think you have to.
Yeah. So I mean, move out west though there too, where we look. There's almost comps to each side in terms of these situations because Nashville is almost in that same. I mean, obviously not with the same pressure that Montreal's under. But for them to be out of a playoff spot is pretty remarkable right now. And, it's not been an injury, but Pekka Rinne has been bad, flat out bad. And they're outside a playoff spot where Colorado's in there. Vancouver, to me, is the comp to the Devils in the West that you just keep waiting for them to fall out of it. And Arizona, too, they're where you just keep waiting for Arizona to fall off a cliff and out of the race. And you look there, and Arizona, it's happened a little bit here. They've lost 4 games in a row. 3 of them have been in regulation. So, and Anaheim's kind of rise here is a little bit. I mean, Anaheim is that Pittsburgh thing too. So, you look at the Western Conference, Dave, and besides, if you throw out the top 4 that are in are Chicago, Dallas, St. Louis, and obviously the Kings in the Pacific Division. I mean, basically the top 3 seeds in the Central are set at this point. But what's interesting to me, Dave, is that the rest of the Central Division has allowed the Pacific to come back, get into play here, and I have a hard time thinking that Anaheim's not going to get in, especially lately.
Yeah, I mean they've been much better lately. They're 6-3-1 in their last 10. I would think, considering that the teams that we're speaking of, where we lump Colorado, Nashville into that mix, considering that there'll be a wild card, and then throwing San Jose, Vancouver, and Arizona in that mix, and I guess Calgary too.
And Minnesota can't score goals all of a sudden.
No, so I mean even they're susceptible to falling off. I would think that the Ducks, over an 82-game season, will find a way to be better than a few of those teams. Not to say that the Ducks are going to go anywhere, maybe the Ducks really are a mediocre team, but are they less flawed than maybe some of the other teams? Okay, I could see that. I would think Anaheim will probably make it, but again, I don't want to, it's just, there's just too much parity right now to say anything, because who knows who's going to get hot. I mean, if someone put a gun to our head 2 months ago and said Colorado Avalanche are going to be a playoff team, we'd be like, no, you're crazy. There's no way. And right now, I mean, they're sniffing it. They're right there. Yeah. So to me, I think that it's really hard right now. And what it comes down to is every game that these teams play against common opponents that are chasing, interconference games are huge, absolutely huge. I mean, every single night could be what you look back at after game 82 and say, wow, if we had those 4 points, the 4-point differential, maybe we would have had it.
And Dave, you hate that deal that the Ducks made on Thursday for Anaheim. I mean, the Garbett for Sekach deal.
Yeah, I do. I love it from Chicago's perspective.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
I mean, Yuri Sekach is a plus possession player that I think that a guy like Quenneville looks at and says, "Oh, I could turn this guy into something. Of course I can." Yeah. But for Anaheim, I mean, like, what are they trying to do? Are they trying to make something happen without making something happen? I know that doesn't make much sense, but I just feel like they're trying to do these like quick fixes. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, where they've been trying these like little tinkerings all year. Well, and it's like, Perron. Perron for Hagelin. Like, what are you really doing? Have they come out of this and said we're better now, or are they just kind of swapping guys and hoping that they catch lightning in a bottle? Because that to me is what it is.
Yeah, the Perron for Hagelin deal actually to me makes sense, just because Anaheim's. We talked about the offense or their lack thereof. And Hagelin is not an offensive player in my head. They got rid of Hagelin's money. Perron is an expiring contract. They're going to get some cap space there. And maybe back in the Western Conference, David Perron will become an offensive force. Outside of Edmonton, where it seems like nobody plays well. But Garbett doesn't make a lot of sense to me, Dave. He's 30 years old, first off, and he does. What does he do? He's 6 points in 40 some odd 43 games. He's a minus player playing for the Blackhawks. He basically, Mike Halford from NBC Sports tweeted out the memorable spearing incident with him and his teammate now, Corey Perry.
Yeah.
He's been traded now twice, and my question is, how does he have trade value? Because there's nothing he really does elite. He's just kind of a pest, and he takes dumb penalties.
He does. I don't know how that makes him better, but it's funny. Chicago has become the opposite of the song, the New York, New York, where it's if you can't make it here, you probably can't make it anywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can't play meaningful minutes in Chicago, what makes anyone think that you're gonna play well somewhere else? I mean, really, it's that one is a head scratcher for sure. I don't know about that trade at all because you look at it and say, well, what is he gonna do for the Ducks? I know maybe they were soured on Seacatch. He's a plus possession player though, so I mean,
and a good defensive player too.
Yeah, I mean, maybe his goal scoring issues this year is part of the team-wide slump they've had. You know, like I don't know. I mean, look, we don't know what they really feel about him and behind closed doors, yada yada, of course. But just for face value, this trade does not make much sense to me. But I think Anaheim is polarizing, and so are the Pittsburgh Penguins, just because these are two big-time teams that people thought could probably, I bet you they got quite a few people picking them in the preseason to go to the Cup Finals, and they're both trying to find their way here. I can't wait. After the All-Star break, it's going to be all hands on deck, and it's going to be must-watch TV every single night.
It's going to be a marathon or sprint to the play. And you know what, Dave, is the interesting thing, for as badly as those two teams played, now they still could get back to that spot where everybody expected them to. And Dave, real fast, while we have this while we're talking about the playoffs here, there's a you look at where the standings are at the moment. And if I'm not mistaken, the Canucks are the only team in a playoff spot from Canada, and so now, Dave, you're running into strange territory where a team from Canada, they're on 23 years without winning the cup, and of course, we all know how much they're pining for the cup to return home to Canada. But Dave, they're in jeopardy of this would be the first time in 36 years that if a Canadian team misses the playoffs, that a Canadian team would miss the playoffs.
Yeah, it's unbelievable to think about, especially because there's one more Canadian team than there was a few seasons ago. Considering that we both are not sure that Vancouver is going to make it, it would not be fun if this becomes an All-American playoffs, just because, look, the fans in Canada across the board are all fantastic. Whether you root for a team that has a rival that's Canadian or not, certainly I always love to see Canadian teams in there. I loved watching the Jets at home last year. I really did in the playoffs. That sea of white, how much the fans were into it. Calgary's fans, after a little bit of a layoff, were really, really good with all the red. I would certainly hope that we do find a Canadian team in there, whether it's Vancouver or perhaps Calgary or in even Montreal, of course. But that would be interesting.
That's the most interesting thing to me is just how you look at how much 5 or who it was the Canadians, the Senators, the Jets, and the Canucks and Flames. 5 of the Canadian teams made the playoffs last year, and you think are kind of into this kind of wave of Canada hockey, and now the Canadian dollar has fallen off a cliff, and now the Canadian hockey teams have fallen off a cliff. So like you said, I think one's going to get in. If anything, that's almost a reason to root for Vancouver here, because you don't want to see that country's markets shut out there. But yeah, no, we'll have what's going on now, while important, pales in comparison to what we're going to get in the next couple of months here. Okay. Dave, you got something you're looking forward to here in the next few days, besides the snowstorm, of course.
Yeah, although that's actually making my weekend much more complicated, the snowstorm. But for me, I'm going to go with the game that's on Sunday. Apologies if you're listening to this on Monday, but the first game that comes to mind is Pittsburgh and Washington, just because Washington's been on fire. Pittsburgh's been playing better. These two teams are certainly not strangers.
Nope.
And it's an NBC 12:30 game on Sunday. This should be a big one for Pittsburgh if they're going to get back into this race and maybe perhaps get into one of the seeded positions in the Metro. They're going to have to win a couple games like this. They're going to have to play the better teams. And really, you can make the case that other than the Capitals, everyone else is kind of mere mortals as the Capitals as like the demigod of the league right now because they're just running away with it. But
Yeah.
I guess Chicago could be lumped in there too.
Yeah.
I think that's a great one.
Yeah. I suppose we should welcome back NBC to the weekend midday hockey market because now that the football season is over for them. I'm going to focus on Devils and Penguins on Tuesday. We talked about, the Penguins are, can you believe we're saying this in January, Dave, that the Penguins are chasing the Devils for that wild card spot at the moment. And as the Devils got a heck of a stretch coming up here where they're going to see a lot of Pittsburgh. They're going to see a lot of the Rangers. And if they're going to be serious about reaching the playoffs this year, it's going to start with that, and then after the All-Star break with all these Metropolitan Division games, we're going to find out if they're really contenders for a playoff spot or whether they've just been kind of stringing everybody along here, especially since they've won 3 games in a row all of a sudden against some good Arizona being in that mix, and then obviously the outburst on Thursday night in against the Senators.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating with them because I think we've both been waiting for the bottom to drop out for them, and it hasn't happened yet. So maybe they'll stick around. They're going to get their chance. Look, they're going to play games against Pittsburgh, and to be quite honest, those games are probably going to decide a playoff spot. I would really think so. If the Devils go out and beat Pittsburgh a couple times here, sure, I'd give it to them. But if Pittsburgh goes out and just kind of whacks them a couple times, I can't see the Devils really recovering necessarily enough if they dig themselves a hole. Plus, the Devils have more games played that if they go on a losing streak here and then everyone catches up to them, they're going to get passed very quickly. So
yeah, for sure. Kyle Palmieri, though, what a story. He's talking about the Ducks' lack of goal scoring. Kyle Palmieri and his 20 goals probably could have been a positive impact, especially what did they get, a 3rd-round pick for him?
Yeah, that's pretty impressive of what he's done, considering he's on pace for over 30 goals right now. It's interesting what I believe it was Bob Murray last year. I believe, don't quote me on this, said that, we know that Palmieri is going to be a 20-goal scorer, so that's why we're trading him because we're not going to be able to pay him. Well, you were right, but don't you think that you would have wanted to keep a guy like that if you knew that you were going to have any sort of scoring woes this year? It's an interesting development that he kind of saw the writing on the wall for his departing player, but not for his own team.
I was going to say there's a lot we could get into with Bob Murray if we had the time.
Yeah, really.
Right now, especially. But yeah, all right. Well, then we'll see how it goes. We'll see how the Storm goes, and we'll see how it all goes. And you know what we can talk about next week, Dave? We can talk about our, the first half of the season is past, but the first half stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we can kind of recap everything. I like using the All-Star break as a chance to kind of do that. I think it's a natural stopping point. So yeah, maybe we'll hand out some awards and dig into some stuff like that. So stay safe out there with the snow. I know it's hitting the East Coast now. I'm sure there's other parts of the country that are getting a little bit as well. So for Pat Pickens, I'm Dave Turner. This is Puck Talk with Pickens and Turner. We'll be right back at you next week.